Are here with Bruce Stephen Foster. Some of you might know him as Bruce Foster when he was on the very first Kiss album, but it is actually Bruce Stephen Foster. How you doing, Bruce?
I'm wonderful today. It's a beautiful day here in sunny New Jersey.
No snowstorms for a change.
Here. It never snows. None of that. It's never winter here.
Now, February 18th is a very sort of infamous day in history. It is 40 years since the first album was released, Kiss Kiss, and you were part of that album. Why don't we tell the folks what you did?
Well, first of all, 40 years ago sounds preposterous since I'm only 43.
Right. You were a prodigy.
Or 39 is I think what I'm sticking to.
Right.
But it was a very, very interesting experience. I had just gotten back from London, England, where I had gone over there to do another project.
Right.
And while I was in the studio early one day at Pi Records in London, I was there pounding on the piano and doing this wild Jerry Lee Lewis stuff, and these three guys from a band poked their head around the corner and said, "You, who are you?" And I said, "I'm Bruce Foster from the United States. Come with us." And it was a group, Status Quo, who
Nice.
Were huge over there.
Still are.
Couldn't sell a record in America.
And it's the same today. They're still big in the UK.
Yeah, and I'm due for a reunion with them too, because they begged me to join the band at the time, and I was determined to go home and do my solo album, which I wound up finally doing. But I'd just gotten back from recording with them and spending months and months over there. So when Richie Wise, the producer, it was Richie Wise and Kenny Kerner at the time producing the first Kiss album, I was actually, kind of a pretty hot session guy at the time.
Right.
And I think that I was probably like the big shot that day, they're getting this hot session guy, for this fledgling group that, who knows, what the mortality rate of is in a band trying to get a hit record. And so, but I know that, Gene might have had a little trepidation about this kid playing on their record. And it all worked out. It worked out very, very well. I think that the clincher of the day was, and I tell the story in the book, Nothin To Lose, that there was an old Stanley piano in Bell Studios in New York.
Right.
And it had, from over the years of having natural ivory, very old piano, instead of, the new pianos had plastic, the old ivory would chip on the sides. And I am doing these glissandos up and down the piano for Nothin To Lose, and it took about 2 or 3 hours to hone in on the part. Richie Wise would say, try it in the upper register, now try everything down low, and try in the middle, honing in on a simple part. But it's more complex than one would think, trying to blend in with what's there without stepping on their toes. So when Gene and Paul Stanley came in, I would say a couple hours into the session, the ragged edges of that piano had sliced up my fingers, and there was blood all over the piano, all over the keys, and I was having a good time. It didn't bother me. I thought it was kind of funky. And Gene kind of, walked in the back, and as anybody knows, Gene can have that very stone face, And as he came closer and saw the blood on the keys, he gave this kind of, broke into a smile on half of his face and nodded his head like, "Yeah, this is good. Blood on the piano." And I think that's one of the big reasons that they kept the piano part in.
Yeah, was it strange for you being there doing piano? Because here's this band that had been in the New York clubs, sort of putting on this big show, larger than life, and they were 4 guys that were loud, and they had the fake Marshall cabinets, and now they've got a piano. Was that something you tried to impose on them, or did they actually say, "Yeah, we need a piano on this song"?
I think that it was it was Richie Wise, the producer,
Okay.
who said it. And since this was their first album, and he had several big hits already, you know, and a couple number ones under his belt, that they were listening, but probably reserved comment until after they heard it. And obviously, the part really lifted that part of the song up.
Oh, absolutely.
And it wound up becoming the first thing that they got played on the radio. So, you know, whether that helped that part of it or not, I'd like to think it did.
So here we are, you know, it's 40 years later. When Gene Simmons walks in and says, I like this part, I don't like this part, what kind of sense did you get from Gene back in the day? Did he just seem like some country bumpkin off the streets, or did he seem like he was in control already?
Oh, no, very, very much so. He and Paul, when they came in, had very much a sensibility about them of people that had a very clear vision.
Right.
And I think that success always begins with that. It's such a crystal clear vision. Their eyes are so, and their mindset is so fixed on the outcome, the total final product, right, the outcome of the whole thing. They can see their whole career in line. And, you know, there was some brilliant moves in marketing and everything under the brainchild of Gene and Paul. Now, so I think that when they walked in, I sensed that immediately. They were not imposing, but they were definitely in control.
Yeah, let me ask you, compared to others. Now, you did state status quo, and you had been sort of the hot shot studio guy. Did other bands and other band members strike you the same way Gene and Paul, or were they uniquely sort of in control?
They the thing that set them apart, quite frankly, was a I wouldn't say unfriendly, but right, a very arm's length stance. And
they weren't there for a party, basically. They were there to be serious.
They were there to be very serious, and
right,
there was no, there were no big smiles coming in or anything like that. This was all business that day, and let's hear what's happening to our song.
So here's the first album they're doing, and they've got, you know, another guy playing on it. It's not just the four. And as Kiss went through their history on Destroyer, they've had Dick Wagner and they've had Anton Fig. They had other ghost musicians. Was there anybody else in that first recording session that came in that played a drum or did a guitar part that just never got any credit?
Not that I know of. It was all just them.
It was just them. And how did the other two guys strike you? How did Ace and Peter strike you?
I never met them that day.
Really?
They were not in the studio. The track had been pre-recorded. Well, had been recorded the day or two before that.
Okay.
And, I mean, it could have been done a week before that, actually. And, so it was a thing of, the producer, Richie Wise, listening to what they had and saying, I really think this song could be something more than it is if we added this. And I have just a guy that can do it.
Okay.
So that's where I came in.
And was that the only song they considered you for? Did you only get to listen to Nothin To Lose, or did they play Deuce in 100,000 Years and said, can you do anything here?
There was one other tune, and it seemed that upon another listen with me actually there,
right,
I think it was a conglomerate of, or at least between Richie Wise and I, because it was before the guys got there, that
really
didn't need it.
It didn't need it. Now, did you get a chance to listen to the rest of the album, or did they just play that one track? So the point being is, if you heard the other tracks, did you get a sense of, oh, we've got something special here, or this is just some other New York band that's going to strike out down the road?
At that time, it was just a. I heard one other song a little bit. Actually, we probably played it all the way through, and it was enough to give me a sense of like, okay, that's what they sound like. but it was essentially the only thing I heard, you know, and over and over again that day was, of course, Nothing to Lose. And it was like, I just knew already at that point in my life that, because I'd already been doing it since I was 16, recording and everything, and a professional musician since I was 14 or 15. It's all I'd ever done. So, you know, you're talking about like 5 years later is a long time when you're that age.
Yeah.
And you've seen already just how slim the chances are of anybody making it.
Well, that's the point. You saw a lot of pretenders, and you must have seen a few contenders also. So, did you get any impression that Kiss was, you know, the next Rocky? Or
yeah, I mean, I played on some things that I felt were magnificent and brilliant and creative and lyrically, you know, wow, you know, this is going to happen, and they barely ever got out of the box, you know, because there's so many things that had to go right, and getting something just played on the radio is a miracle, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, yeah, and because there are so, you know, and there's so many politics involved in when you have a bunch of different artists on, let's say, just one label, or whether the radio stations can only play, they're only allowed to play a certain amount of new songs, at least in America it was at that time. You know, secondary stations could play more new songs in a week. But the primary stations, man, you know, like 1 or 2, maybe 3 new songs out of, like, 30 or 40 releases on major labels a week. So, you know, it's rare air up there to just even get to that point. And then hope to get it in enough rotation that people will hear it enough times that they want to buy it. Now, one of the things that you cannot make people do, no matter how many times they hear a thing on the radio, is go out and buy that record.
Yeah,
absolutely. So between the marketing, the novelty of the way they presented themselves, or the, you know, the kabuki thing, everything worked for them. And as it seems to me, Neil Bogart, now correct me if I'm wrong, because the original album was released with, you know, I forget now how many songs that was on it, and it wasn't happening the way Neil Bogart wanted it to happen.
Right.
He called them back in the studio and they recorded Kissing Time.
Correct.
Kissing Time.
That's absolutely correct.
And re-released it with that. And I don't know what happened after that, but it just started. It seems like that was the thing that they needed, even though I don't think that was really a hit. It gave them that.
The publicity around it with all the silly kissing contests, where you know, people had to lock lips for 14 hours at a time or whatever it was, that's sort of what grew the whole myth. I mean, the song itself was a throwaway, Kissing Time, not Nothing to Lose. But yeah, I guess it's that publicity, it's that PR stunt that every band needs to get their career going. By the way, Nothing to Lose, the song, was also released on February 18th, 1974. The song and the album, in terms of a single, are both celebrating 40 years.
And I don't remember whether Nothing to Lose, did it get on the charts? I don't remember. I was involved in so many things those days that until something became, like, you know, in the top 10, I wasn't even following it, you know? So no, I don't even know.
No, Kissing Time made it, according to Wikipedia now, Kissing Time made it to 83 on the charts, and no other single charted. So.
Right. Wow. How about that?
But let's look at some of the cast of characters, and if maybe you could comment on each. Did you ever have Neil Bogart hanging around the studio?
Not then. I wound up as a solo artist, oddly enough, on Millennium Records, which was a subsidiary of Casablanca. I spent a lot of time in L.A., and at Casablanca Records, during which time I met Neil Bogart and his kids that worked there, who were very cool.
Okay.
And but never really hung out with Neil really never really had it wasn't that kind of a situation.
Okay. Sean Delaney, who wrote songs with Peter and stuff. Ever meet him? Was he hanging around the studio?
Never met him either. And it's oddly enough, the only person that from Kiss that I really got to know was Gene. And
Okay.
I would run into him in, back in the days when they could walk around on the streets because nobody knew what they looked like without the makeup on. So I would run into Gene in a deli in Los Angeles, I ran into him backstage at a Billy Joel concert at Madison Square Garden. And it's funny that every time for at least the next 15 years that I ran into Gene, and it was a bunch of times, every single time he'd pick up my hands, first of all, and look at them to see if they were still bleeding. And it was the ongoing joke. And one thing I got to say about Gene is that I kind of sat in a little bit listening to them recording the second album.
Oh, did you? Okay.
It was, there was a little bit of like, is there anything that Bruce should play on this again? It was good luck in getting the first thing on the radio, whatever, And so I was there a little bit, and Gene is one of the funniest people on the planet. He could say a one-word response to something that was, a conversation that was going on. And he would just say one word that would put you on the floor. And he was really quick and really, really witty, all the while keeping that stone face. So he was a funny guy. But we, the last real conversation I remember having with him is got to be almost 20 years ago now.
Wow.
And that's why I have to call the office and just say, hey, you know what? Doing a 40th anniversary tour, I should be up there and play it on Nothin To Lose.
Oh, I agree. That would be fantastic.
Yep, I think I should do that.
They're coming to your part of the woods on April 10th for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, you jamming up there would be perfect.
Yeah. I
But
think that I need to get on the horn and start making some calls.
Yep.
But the last time I saw Gene was at the record plant in Los Angeles, and he happened to be there that night with Diana Ross. And even though they had formally broken up as a serious couple, they were still really good friends. And so Gene was in the other room. I saw Gene first, and of course, he kicked it off by picking up my hands, and then have you learned how to do that yet? And after we shared that usual laugh on that, I said, what do you think about you're spending most of your time out here now? Do you like it better out here than New York? And he said, out here there's trees, there's no culture. It says, I look at a tree and I don't see anything. I want to see. I love New York because there's culture there, and so I wound up. As a matter of fact, I have to say this. It's just one of those rock and roll moments that you love. So I wound up in this game room at the record plant out in L.A., which was wonderful. They had a pinball. Of course, back then it was all pinball games. And they had one where you had to try to get the gold record.
Right.
And so in this case, Diana Ross was playing, who was one of the most beautiful creatures in the universe. In person, I'll tell you, she has a divine countenance about her, and she is one beautiful girl. And so she was in this very relaxed repose playing Ms. Pac-Man and asked me if I wanted to play with her. So I said, sure. Now, I'm the worst in the world at that stuff. So while she was, really just kind of zoning in on it, and like staying ahead of them and winning, then it would come to my turn. And you put me on something like that, and those things follow me. You're biting me in the ass every second, and I'm just like a split second ahead of them. And this Diana, who was so, as I say, like in this Zen repose, after about 10 minutes of watching me, it was like, oh my God, oh look out, oh shit, oh, and it was like,
That's funny.
It was just amazing to watch her just fall apart, watching me almost get eaten by these things every other second.
That's funny. Now, we've gone 20 minutes here, so I want to get a few more things in here.
Wow.
Your comments about Kenny Kerner, some comments about Bill O'Coin, and then let's just talk about you working with Richie Sambora. You have two albums that came out probably 10 or 15 years ago now called Shark Frenzy, but they had been recorded back in the day before he became famous with Bon Jovi. So let's just quickly go with let's start off with Kenny, work our way to Bill, and then over to Richie.
Okay, Kenny Kerner, one of the sweetest people that ever lived, and I have not spoken to him in many years, but we were always very, very good friends. And he worked, the way I recall, with Richie, he was more of the business end of it, and Richie did really more of the hands-on producing.
So would you say Richie really produced the first record, and Kenny was just sort of somebody he bounced things off, like at the end? Was Richie really in charge?
I think that Kenny was there for yays or nays. You know, what do you think of this? But Richie was the creative guy who was a musician and knew music. Yeah.
Okay. So Kenny was sort of the moral support, and Richie was sort of the worker that got the job done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very much so.
Bill O'Coin, was he running around telling you what to do? I mean, you know, Kiss.
No, he wasn't there at all.
Okay.
He wasn't there at all.
So no sense of Bill. So let's get to Shark Frenzy. You know, here you are, hanging out in New Jersey. You've got this band with Richie Sambora. You've done some songs, and now, you know, as we move over into 2014, you're still writing with him. On his last album, Aftermath of the Lowdown, you have a song that you wrote with him.
Yeah, and it's wonderful because after all these years, we're still very, very best friends. I always called him my little brother, and you know, he still calls me bro too, and it's you know, very, very connected that way and spiritually. And when we get together, and we were just laughing about it literally a couple of weeks ago when he was in town, that how we always write these heavy spiritual things. And I said, yeah, but you know, we're guiding a lot of people with this. A lot of people out there need some positive thing that gets a little bit beyond rock and roll, you know. And if that's what we do so well together, then that's what it is. So we wrote this song that's on his new album called World. And if you go to YouTube, by the way, click on World by Richie Sambora, and it'll give you several sites, but there's one with shaved head Buddhist kids.
Right.
Click on that, and somebody out there did a magnificent, heartfelt slideshow that really goes along with everything. And incidentally, somebody just did a great slideshow to a song that I had out as a solo artist shortly after I did all this stuff with Kiss, and it was my Beatles tribute song called Platinum Heroes.
Yeah.
Platinum Heroes, and if you click on that, there's also a couple things on that, but click on the one that has a Beatles album cover, and somebody did a magnificent slideshow that goes along with my chronology of the Beatles from 1964 to 1970. Yeah,
I remember Platinum Heroes, and in fact, I believe that's how we met years and years ago doing the whole Rock Reporter thing. I got a acetate of Platinum Heroes with a photocopied insert. This must have been 2004, 2000. I mean, or even before that, and it was coming out on CD, and or maybe you just sent it to me. I forget, but I remember that you sent me a whole Platinum Heroes album years ago.
Wow, how about that?
Yeah,
I guess I did.
You did. I know you did. I have it downstairs. But okay, well, let me ask you the tough questions quickly about Richie. How does he feel about not being in Bon? Or how do you feel that he feels about? I mean, obviously you can't answer for him, but has that come up in conversation?
Well, yeah, and here's what I water very carefully, because I think that, you know, very much he is looking at it as a hiatus. I know that he getting priorities together as a 16-year-old daughter,
right,
that he wanted to spend more time with.
Right.
And he was watching his whole life go by out on tour with Bon Jovi. And I just think that it came to a point where he needed to make a drastic decision in his life about what he was really going to do. And, I think he's got enough money that he doesn't have to worry about it. He can be independent here for a while. And if there's never a Bon Jovi again, then that's the consequences that he would have to take for stepping out the way he did. I just think it was kind of breaking out of a cave for a minute for him, and I think he's doing very much the right thing. He's very, very happy, very spiritual, and I think that hopefully when they all get back together again, I think it's going to make the band stronger. They've been going out every year, nonstop for a long, long time. I think it's almost a good move, whether John realized it at the time or not, to have this happen. Now when they all get back together, it's going to be big news again, and I think create a whole new, fresh energy.
Well, I agree. After the New Jersey tour back in '89 that dragged on for 2 or 3 years, they took a little break from each other, and they came back real strong in order to survive the whole Nirvana onslaught of the 90s and still be a band through the 90s and into 2014. I think they needed that break. Had they gone right back in the studio, I think they would have self-destructed back in 1991 or whatever. So yeah, good on him. And the other question, or not really question, but when you put out the 2 Shark Frenzy albums, Richie could have said to you, don't do it. He could have blocked it. He could have sent lawyers, but he let you do it. He let you put them out. And to me, that speaks to somebody who's very gracious and very loyal to his friends. And I don't know, would you agree, disagree? How would you characterize Richie?
He's one could never say enough good things about Richie. Okay. He's just one of the most honest, wonderful people that ever walked the planet. Right. I've never seen him anything else other than completely honest and and just good-hearted. So that has to answer, I think, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's sort of recap here. 40 years for the first Kiss album. Folks have got to go out and buy it if they don't already have it. Get to Amazon or iTunes and pick up those 2 Shark Frenzy albums. I have them. They're great. I mean, forget that Richie Sambora on them. They're just fun rock albums. They really are.
Thank you.
And I'll throw in my last 2 cents. April 10th in New York. You have to be on stage, doing your best Jerry Lee Lewis to Nothin To Lose with the other guys. That's a must. So
yeah, if they do Nothin To Lose, I should be up there.
I agree. I fully agree. Well, this has been great.
I've really enjoyed it. It's always wonderful hearing from you, Mitch, and thank you very much, and to all the Kiss fans out there in the world. I just have to end it with the same quote that I said in the book, and it's so amazing to me that no matter what else I've done or continue to do in the music industry, and some things that I think are, rather decent achievements, the only thing, if somebody ever has read my biography, that anybody ever got excited for, after reading through all that, they'll stop and say, "Oh my God, you played with Kiss?"
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? I mean, I'm sure when you went in that day, it was just this throwaway session. You're like, all right, I'll make $20 and I'll go home and have a beer or whatever. And all of a sudden, 40 years later, people are going, "You played on that?"
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing.
Hey, after 40 years, have you figured out where Drago is yet?
Well, you told me today. After 40 years, I finally figured out who it was.
That's right. Alan
was
Tucker,
the other engineer.
That's right. So, anything for people to check out? Is there a .com or a Twitter or where can people find you?
I would say just keep checking. I'm in the process of creating a new comprehensive Bruce Foster website, Bruce Stephen Foster website. Make sure it goes to all 3, STEPHEN, and pretty soon there'll be all sorts of things up there.
Good. Well, hopefully we'll find a Facebook and a Twitter and all that fun stuff. But again, I'll say it again, head over to Amazon.com or iTunes, get those 2 Shark Frenzies, and thank you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Mitch. You have a wonderful rest of the day, and my very, very fondness to all of the fans out there in the world.
Great. Well, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.